10 years ago, we were
Call the meeting of the tab to order here. It is 12:34 on the 18th of February, 2026. And let's see what we've got here. We've got an agenda to approve. Is there anybody that has any changes or additions to the agenda? We'll entertain approval of the agenda.
I'll move the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second? We got a motion second, Commissioner Jepson, to approve the agenda for the meeting on this date, February 18. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We've got an agenda to work from. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address the tab on a matter of concern to them? It's not on the agenda or scheduled for a hearing. Frank's coming in. No, that's good. All right, let's go to reports. So I've got a few things to cover with all of you today. We had an exec committee meeting beforehand, and I think we just have to appoint. Do we want to have the tab vote on these?
No, it's just appointed.
Just appointed. So I'm just going to report out on the appointments for the first and second vice chairs for 2026. Commissioner Jepson has agreed to serve as the first vice chair for the tab exec committee for 2026, and Mayor Taylor Hubbard has agreed to serve as the second vice chair for 2026. We thank them for their service. And then we also appointed the tab liaison person. Peter Dugan has agreed to again serve in 2026 as he did in 2025. So that was good. We did talk about some of the things on the agenda today. We're going to take those up in due course, including the acknowledgement that occupies front and center location at the beginning of the agenda. I want to make sure people are aware of that. We're going to have a conversation about how to make the proper level of acknowledgement and talk about some of the commitments that the council is making in written form and for the work that they do, and see how that affects how we want to approach our work as well related to Native peoples. So we'll talk about that in due course. And then Steve Peterson asked me to report out on the regional solicitation public comment period, which closed yesterday. The public comment period closed with 22 comments received. The public meeting was held on February 10th. No comments were received at the public meeting. There was also a budget survey tool that was used and completed by more than 80 people. They're in the process of absorbing all this information, distilling it, and coming back to us at a subsequent meeting with more detail around some of those comments. And then they're going to also approach the TAC and Funding and Programming Committee about recommendations they might have about incorporating some of those comments into the solicitation and talking to us about it as well as the full tab. The targeted outreach completed was in all 7 counties where people were asked to complete the budget survey tool. So we got everything covered there from 7 county standpoint. And as I mentioned, the regional solicitation applications will go back to TAC Funding and Programming on the 26th of February to consider any changes from the public comment period, and then back to the full tab in March. And in March, your chair and first vice chair will not be here, but your second vice chair will be chairing the meeting in March. So we thank her for that in advance. Also, Steve Peterson wanted us to know that the Met Council has submitted a discretionary grant request to the federal USDOT for a planning grant application for what they call, the acronym is BUILD. And it would be for a prioritization study already listed in the 2050 TPP and UPWP called the Existing Interchange Modernization Study. As Steve points out, we've got over 350 interchanges in the metropolitan area that need modernization. And as an example, one that's underway, a project underway, it's right outside City Hall in Edina on Highway 100 and Vernon Avenue, where we're adding pedestrian capabilities, bike lane capabilities, and trying to clean up that little mini spaghetti junction we had there.
Yeah.
So it's that project to be completed in June. It would have been completed by now, except we had 2 bridge projects. Really, we had the one over Highway 100 at Vernon, and then the county Hennepin County had what they said was one of their more deficient bridges in Hennepin County over the railroad tracks right to the west of that intersection I just described by Devani's and the Holiday Station there, if you know that area. And so that bridge is being replaced, and we got slowed down there because it's a CP rail line, and anytime you're working with a rail, it's a slow process. And then CP Rail discovered that Xcel Energy had some conduit in their right of way. That led to all kinds of finger pointing and delay and everything. So we're not going to be done with the whole thing until June. But it is going to be a pretty remarkable transformation. And the land that's been recaptured, owned by MnDOT on the east side, on the City Hall side, is pretty remarkable. So I think that's it for me. I'm going to report also out for, I could do that now, I guess. I could report out for the MAC. Bridget Reef couldn't be with us today, and they haven't appointed somebody yet to serve as the rep to the TAB. Brian Ricks, the CEO of the MAC, would like to extend his thanks to the full council, Deb, for the warm reception in January for his MAC presentation. And then here's some passenger numbers for 2025. They are down by 2.95% with a total of 36.1 million passengers. They did, however, hit an all-time record for international destinations in 2025, and international travelers accounted for 3.6 million passengers total, also a record. MSP operations in 2025 totaled approximately 343,000, which is up slightly from 2024. The MAC Reliever Airport operations were also up by about 4%, is what's reported. And then, of course, as we've seen in the newspaper, Delta announced a nonstop service to Maui starting December 19th through April 27th, and they're anticipating about 170 passengers a day on that Minneapolis to Maui flight. So that was it for the presentation from those folks. And again, I think 3 out of the past 4 years, they've been ranked #1 under J.D. Powers for customer satisfaction in mega airports, which would include places like Atlanta and Chicago. I was in a meeting last weekend with the leadership team for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and those two mayors kind of got into it about who had the best airport. So well, customer satisfaction is a pretty big deal. I mean, you might have more passengers and more flights, but we got the happiest people. So anyway, I think that's it for me. I'm going to turn now to our agency reports, and I'm going to go first to Connie Sahibjam for reporting out on MnDOT activities. Connie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We, as always, safety related, you remember last year we were 100 fatalities less than the year before. This year, as of yesterday, we've had statewide, we've had 27 fatalities compared to last year, 37. So we're 10 less. So I'm hoping this trend will continue. It's a big thing if that truly is the case. But we'll see. Summertime speeds are going to pick up, and it's going to be more. Since I'm looking at snow out there, just let you know we've had our District 1 up in Duluth. They're getting between 24 and 40 inches, which is a big range. And we sent some of our snow fighters up there yesterday to help them out because we're not going to get as much. So far this year, we've had 28 inches of snow, which is equal to last two years. It's been the same. An average snowfall is about 50 inches a year in Minnesota. So we have time to catch up with the average. But it's been it's a lot more than last year and the year before. Obviously, the problem has been those 28 inches. We only had like 1 or 2 big storms. The rest of them were 1-inch storms, one after the other, which is exhausting to the crews. And so I want to thank our snow fighters publicly for working around the clock to do that. Legislature, as you know, started yesterday. There is the bonding level. You all know it's around $1 billion. Governor had $900 million, and we've had, from what I know, between the locals and the state, there's rounded up a little bit, $7 billion worth of requests to do bonding, but there'll probably be only about $1 billion to do that. So big, as always, big need for infrastructure. One interesting dynamic that we have, I found out yesterday that the locals have asked for would like $5 billion worth of work on the trunk highway. This is our local partners, mainly counties and I suppose cities too, but that adds up to, when we did our minship, that's the number that we've got, $5 billion worth of work that the locals would like to do on the trunk highway system. We already do some of that, and it changes how we deliver projects, and it's a great way of partnering, but it's interesting we're two different entities looking at a system different ways for different needs. Economic development, I'm assuming, for the counties, and for us, maybe some of that, but maybe system and operation and other safety and other reasons. So that's still that's coming. Speaking of public comments, Mr. Chair, we have our Rethinking I-94 project between the two downtowns. That's out for public comments, started in January 6th through mid-March sometime is where it's going to continue. Please encourage your communities and folks who are interested in looking at it and are impacted by it, not just those who live there, but those who go through there. There's 4 alternatives that's going to be put forward as far as going into a federal process, an EIS. The last thing I wanted to talk about is about some road closures that we have, some significant ones. This weekend, we will close westbound 394 until June. So Sunday night, they'll start. So Monday morning, going westbound out of downtown, or if you're coming westbound on 94, all of that traffic will go on the reversible lanes, which is 2 lanes, and so they can work on all the bridges on the westbound side. And that will go till June, like I said, and then June through November, eastbound going into downtown from the west. That all will be closed, the general purpose lanes. All of that traffic will be on the reversible lanes. If you remember, reversible lanes were fixed last summer. And trust me on this, we've been over communicating. I call it over communicating. I've personally have met with big businesses in downtown with their VPs encouraging flexible hours. And because it's going to be difficult if everybody wants to leave downtown Minneapolis at 5 o'clock. It's going to take them a while to get out. Or go out the other way. Look for options. So, and then we work with the cities and the neighborhoods such as Bryn Mawr and other neighborhoods we connect with in the area. Kind of related to that, traffic impacts. I had, a while back, I promised Member Martinson, surprised you haven't brought it up.
I just hadn't raised my hand yet. I had plans to.
You planned to. So that when we, if you remember on I-94, the Dartmouth Bridge, when we narrowed it down to 2 lanes last summer, it created a lot of congestion. And we did a mini study, you can say, seeing what the impact of that was to different modes, different streets, and different entities. So we have one, but I think I'm told maybe the best time to present that is in the April, if there's time to do that. I don't think March was one that, based on what Molly tells me. So we will promise that to cast that in stone and have a presentation on that. And we're going to do the same thing on 394 over this year. So with that, I'm done. I was flanked by 2 county engineers that were going to keep me on time, so I think
You did okay.
If anybody has any questions. All right,
He's running out of time.
all right. MPCA, Frank Kolash. Member Kolash, thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon. Again, Frank Kolash, Assistant Commissioner for Air and Climate Policy with Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I'll just go quickly over 4 items today. First, start off with the good news that last week we released from the Climate Change Subcabinet at the state level the 2026 Climate Action Framework. It includes 7 chapters, one of them focused on transportation, reducing emissions from transportation. Also includes significant input from local governments and tribal governments, tribal nations, in the direction that Minnesota needs to go. The high-level parts that we focus on within that framework are reducing emissions to meet our statutory goals, which is a 50% reduction by 2030 and then net zero by 2050. Also ensuring that resiliency is built into all of our systems to protect people, landscapes, infrastructure, and businesses. And then equity focus, ensuring that all Minnesotans have an opportunity to participate in the process and receive benefits from climate action in Minnesota moving forward. We also included forecasting and workforce analysis and a health impact analysis from reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I will provide a link to Elaine, and you can find that. The short link is mn.gov/climate, and then it's under the framework. I think that's the good news here. We also at the Pollution Control Agency have grants open under our Climate Pollution Reduction Grant for food systems. 2 of those are focused on the organic waste and waste management, solid waste management side of the equation, making sure that we keep organics from going into landfills and where they produce methane. So those are open, and then another grant that is open for electrifying particular diesel and gasoline engines that are used to transport goods in the climate smart food system operation or part of our economy. So those grants are open to make those replacements. And then I also want to call out that the Minnesota Climate Innovation Finance Authority has a call for applicants open right now for the Finance Authority. These are loans that are given to businesses or governments, typically used with payback from tax credits or other energy savings. They do focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing costs, and increasing reliability for energy for Minnesotans, and then bringing innovation that will spur economic development in Minnesota. So that is on the MINCFA, Minnesota Climate Innovation Finance Authority's website. And then the final item was just today in the Federal Register, EPA published their repeal of the endangerment finding for greenhouse gases from transportation sources in the United States. That is a reversal of a 2009 decision in which EPA now says that the greenhouse gases emitted from the cars and trucks on the roads in the United States are not endangering health and welfare of the United States, and that removes all the regulatory authority that EPA would claim to have under the Clean Air Act. And then it also repeals the vehicle emission standards for greenhouse gases going back from 2012 to 2027 and beyond. So a pretty major impact on the regulatory side, fully expected. It was a matter of time of when they were going to announce that. They announced that last week, and it was published in the Federal Register today. And for that action now, it will become effective April 20th of this year. And the fight now will go into the courts. Well, that will be challenged and defended by multiple parties. That's what I have for my report today.
All right, thank you, Member Kulash. Any questions for Frank? All right, thank you. Yeah, quite interesting information. Met Council Member Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things tonight. First is our annual ridership. We will be reporting that out in March, so we don't have that quite yet today. I just want to kind of put it on your radar as we're using somewhat different methodology. I cannot explain it all, so don't ask questions yet. But we were actually undercounting numbers on Metro Transit, and so we're trying to rebuild all of that. We're waiting for some approvals from FTA, so hopefully we'll have those annual numbers for you all in March. And then also it is the legislative session, which means we have a number of legislatively mandated reports that we are required to give. And so so you're aware, the first one is actually being presented in about 7 minutes, is the high subsidy transit route analysis. And we also have reports coming up on the premium on-demand pilot expansion, a MnDOT review of Metro Mobility, the Metro Mobility forecast evaluation, also from Metro Transit, cleaning and repair standards reports, and updates on transit safety and ridership. So keep an eye out for some of those. They usually provide a lot of great information and a good overview of things that are happening and will be being reported to the legislature over the next month. And then finally, Metro Transit added a new leadership position leading a consolidated planning and project delivery group. Tab is familiar with Katie Roth as the arterial BRT director. Katie began a new role this week at the Metro Transit as the Metro Transit Assistant General Manager of Planning and Project Delivery. This is a new position for Metro Transit that will lead the strategic planning vision and the direction and management of service development, arterial BRT, transit-oriented development, and facilities planning departments. So very excited for her. So we'll likely still see her coming here, but with a slightly different role. And that's all I have today.
Good. Any questions for Member Barber? All right, let's move on to Gary Hansen.
Thank you, Mr.
River
Chair.
report.
Maple Grove Transit and Plymouth Metrolink reported steady to slightly increasing ridership in January. Southwest Transit reported a nearly 10% overall increase in ridership. They also commented on demonstrations in Minneapolis causing delays or temporary adjustments on some routes, and that was also noted by Minnesota Valley Transit. So they're trying to deal with that. Hopefully that's over. MVTA's express ridership to St. Paul increased 19% in January, and Connect Microtransit ridership was up 22%. And MVTA has received a couple of what I think are noteworthy funding awards from counties, including a Dakota County Communities for All Award to support disability awareness training for bus operators. The program invests in initiatives that advance equity, inclusion, and access across Dakota County communities. And they also received a Scott County statewide Health Improvement Partnership Award to promote active transportation in Scott County. The program supports local strategies that improve health outcomes by making it easier for people to incorporate active transportation into their daily lives. That award may be applied toward installation of bike lockers at a park and ride, or perhaps wayfinding signage connecting riders to nearby parks and trails. So a good use of funds. Active transportation, of course, something that we've talked a lot about. So that's my report.
Any TAB members have questions for Member Hansen on his report? Okay, very good. Chair McPherson, anything to report out on from the TAC?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. Nothing to report on outside of the business items before us today.
Okay, stand by. We'll have you back up momentarily. I don't see Doug Anderson here today, so he can't spontaneously move the minutes. Is someone care to move the minutes in Doug's absence? Mayor? Yeah, Mayor Bailey moves. Got a second?
Second.
Morrison.
All right. We had a motion and a second on the minutes for January 21, 2026. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the minutes of January 21, 2026 with the Transportation Advisory Board, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Those minutes are approved. We've got some consent agenda items, 2 items there in that category, 2026, 15, and 16, and Chair McPherson's going to walk us through those.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you. So the first one here, 2026-15, MnDOT's requesting an amendment to the 2026 TIP to add a National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Project to the list. So this project was originally programmed for 2025. However, it didn't get completed then, so we're adding it to the 2026 TIP. And this relates to a vehicle charging station associated with the NEVI program at the Lake Elmo exit on I-94. So the cool thing with that is Connie has sponsored, I think the first 6 people get free cups of coffee. Is that how that works?
Hi.
While you're waiting for your car to charge? Maybe not. Maybe I heard that somewhere else.
Donuts,
But
too.
donuts.
Donuts.
Yeah, donuts, there we go. So with that, there was full unanimous support from the TAC on this item.
Question for the chair on that matter?
All right, I'll move into the second one here. The next one is 2026-16, and this is a scope change request to amend the 2026 TIP to address some added scope with the traffic management system and some additional costs associated with lighting on MnDOT's Minnesota 77 Bridge Rehabilitation Project. So another pretty streamlined TIP amendment here, but open it up to any questions.
And adding lighting in the traffic management system, I think.
Correct.
Key elements of that. Okay. Somebody have questions on 2026-16? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt 2026, 15, and 16 in a single motion.
So move. Second.
You guys are on
Second,
top of
John.
it. All right, we got a motion. Was it Member Marrast? Moved it?
Stefan.
That corner.
Oh, Stefan. All right.
We're on it.
Mayor Stephenson moved. Commissioner Zhang seconded the adoption of the 2026, 15, and 16 in a single motion. Any further discussion? Those in favor of adoption of those items in a single motion on the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Those items are approved. We've got one item here in the non-consent portion of the agenda, which is the regular business item, 2026-14, and Chair McPherson did a good job of explaining this at the exec committee meeting. It may get complicated as we have this conversation, and there may be some opinions that we need to really vet through here as we decide what we're going to do with respect to this request. So, Chair McPherson, go ahead and lead us off.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the staff pulling this map up. This will help kind of walk us through the requested change here. So the City of Minneapolis has requested a scope change to remove some pedestrian improvements at 2 intersections on Park and Portland Avenues in the Elliott Park neighborhood, and then add some improvements along 11th Street there, so, or 11th Avenue South in the same neighborhood. So on the screen before you, for those that are following along, the 2 dark blue or purple dots that you see on the left, those would be the elements that are being requested be removed from this project. And I'll get into the reason why in a little bit. And then the lighter blue associated with that red line, those are the existing intersections that were in that original application that are remaining, but there were some revisions to the scope since the time of application. And then the red line that you see on the screen there, that is added work associated with the improvements at those 2 light blue intersections and the associated intersection improvements. So now I'll try and walk through what the request is here. So in 2022, the city had requested funding under the pedestrian facilities category. They were awarded $2 million for these projects. And again, those are the 4 dots that you see. That was the original application. Since that time, Hennepin County came in and they did a mill and overlay project on Park and Portland there, which incorporated some ADA improvements and other associated improvements at the 2 darker blue dots that you see on the screen there. So recognizing that some of the improvements that were included in that original pedestrian application were completed with that project, not all of them, but a majority of them. They're also looking at a future project in 2033 in Hennepin County's, I call it your 10-year plan. So you have a 5-year capital improvement program, then you have a 10-year plan, which you start scoping out to start leading into that 5-year plan. Since the 2024 work was completed and a majority of the improvements were included in that project, they're requesting that those projects be pulled from the application. So there's an associated reduction, as you'll see further here, associated with removing those 2 intersection improvements from the project. And then the light blue, in addition to the originally scoped work that they were planning to do there were some additional changes since that time. Feedback as they went through design, they are taking the existing bike lanes that are painted on the roadway, and they're converting that from a bike lane on each side of the road that runs parallel with the lanes of traffic. They're going to move that to the west or north side of 11th Avenue, and it'll be head-to-head bike traffic on its own separated facility behind a barrier, a curbed barrier. So with that, there was some additional scope changes that need to take place at the light blue intersections to accommodate that change. And then with that, since you're relocating those 2 bike lanes on opposite sides of the road to the same side of the road, the intent would be to carry that design element all the way through along 11th Avenue South to the termini you see on the upper portion of the screen there. That's a little description of what's going on there. There were kind of 3 options that were considered by the Funding and Programming Committee as well as the TAC Committee. The first one would be, the request is they're removing the 2 dark blue or purple elements. So there would be a requested reduction, which is option 1 on page 3 of your info packet there if you're following along. So they would retain $912,000 of the original $2 million that they had requested, which recognizes the reduction in cost from those two intersections being removed. The second option would be that, however, some money would be given back to address some of the scope changes that took place at the two light blue intersections to accommodate that facility change with the two-way bike lane there, or bike facility. Then the third option would be all of what I just said, so removal of the two dark blue ones, the additional scope of the light blue ones, and then adding a new element, which would be that extension of that two-way head-to-head bike facility all the way up 11th Avenue, as you see on the screen there. The original project and application request only talked about the intersection improvements, so that is an added scope item to this request. So those were the three items we're looking at. There's also a fourth item, which is denying the request, but we're focusing on these three here. So funding and programming took a look at this. They had a long, healthy conversation about it. They looked at what the policy is for scope changes. And so typically what we've seen in the past is if a scope change like this comes forward, two intersections are removed, but they're programmed under another project in the near future, let's say in the next year or two, then in those cases, the funding that was applied to those intersections, as long as all the scoped work and intended work is being completed under that other project, they could maintain those dollars. In this case, as I mentioned earlier, those two darker blue or purple dots there, in 2024, the county had completed a majority of the improvements that were originally scoped, but not everything. And so with that, they're also planning a project at those two intersections, but it is not currently programmed in their 5-year CIP. So again, a little difference there is you have your 5-year CIP, which a lot of us know, you've guys seen those come across your desk. Those have funding tied to them. They're programmed out for 5 years so that you can get a basis of what your program looks like for your transportation system. In this case, it's included in Hennepin County's 10-year plan. So their program plan just to get geared up with their local partners to start moving forward. So as of what we heard at the TAC meeting, there's no funding applied to those projects yet, so it is out in the future. So that is one difference based on what you've seen in the past. So with that, funding and programming also discussed the improved scope or the updated scope of the two light blue intersections that you see there associated with those bike facility improvements. And so they agreed that due to the changes that they're proposing there, the feedback they've received since the time of application, it's warranted. So they were supportive of seeing the additional scope. So that would be in line with what you see there, number 2. So number 2 is you remove the funding, because like I said, they're not gonna build those improvements in the near future. It'd be something future programmed. So we remove the funding for the two dark blue or purple. There's added scope. So that's what is in line with number 2. TAC approved that. They're supportive of that. Prior to that, the Funding and Programming Committee also looked at the red line, which is that pedestrian facility improvement. Wasn't originally included in the application, but it's something that correlates with the work they're doing at those two light blue intersections. So because of that, they put a request in to include that in the project. And so Funding and Programming looked at that. They had a long discussion, and initially they approved that on a 16-4 vote. The 4 that voted against it stated that that's outside of the scope change policy, where if you have a new element added to a project, you can't use federal funds to fund that new element in a project. You can still have the scope change, you can still approve the scope change, but you can't use federal dollars to pay for the added scope that's put into the project. And we've seen that time and time again as they come across this committee here. So Funding and Programming, again, picked option 3. TAC took another look at it after having a further discussion and following in line with the policy. They approved option 2 with basically a unanimous vote. The one no vote we had was the Funding and Programming Chair just upholding the effort that the Funding and Programming Committee put forward. After further conversation with Jim Klasucher, who's the chair, he said they also support option 2 there. So we do have unanimous support right now for option 2, which again is removing the federal funding for the dark blue purple and approving the additional scope funds for the two blue intersections, light blue intersections, but not the red line. And so if you followed all that, it's a lot of detail. I'm happy to answer any questions on that. Otherwise, we do have a representative from the city who is here to answer any questions as well.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you got somebody here from the city. All right, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that detailed explanation. Yeah, I think as some of our TAB members looked at this project, particularly, I think Member Johnson thought about this situation where the proposal was to eliminate those intersection improvements at 15th Street and Portland Avenue and 14th and Park. Sent in some photographs of some accidents from, I think, 2020 forward. And I think it'd be important in this conversation to have some input on all the different options that we talked about at the exec committee meeting, but of course you weren't there, but we would like your input at this point in time.
Yes, and thank you, Chair. Again, if you didn't see the email, I live on this map, and I'm very near one of these intersections being removed, and sort of the ongoing neighborhood, I can't say it's a fun activity, but you meet your neighbors when there's a crash on this corner, and they happen frequently. So unfortunately, I have many pictures of crashes at these corners, and so I just wanted to send that over as context for, our decisions here do have impacts on these projects getting built or not. I do want to just state up front, I do want to support the scope change here. I mean, I want the existing project we can do on 11th Avenue to happen. I just want to be very clear about that. There should be no question it follows our policies. It's just a matter of, is it option 2 or 3, I think is really the conversation we should be having. But one thing I did want to flag, and it's come up certainly on our meeting on Monday with the appointed member info session, is this is sort of a stress test of our new scope change policy. It's sort of asking, if you add an element, what does that actually mean? I think that came up in, I think at least at F&P, if not at the TAC meeting. I think that's an important thing for, us potentially to give some feedback to the technical staff to think about and talk a little bit more about. But fundamentally, I just want to point out that some of this comes down to jurisdictional challenges. Park in Portland, our county roads, Minneapolis stepped up in 2022 and said, we want to do something about this intersection that intersects with city streets. Again, they identified dangerous intersections and tried to address them, but because of federal policy about payback, if a project gets ripped up when it's federally funded in a certain timeline, the county not having solidified its timeline yet for when they were going to be doing this project, all these things are sort of, I'm going to use the word conspire, but it's all just unintentional. All these things happen behind the scenes that got us to the point of 2 dangerous intersections having improvements being put off for an additional 8 years. That's a concern, and I just wanted to make sure I brought that up today. And I appreciate the city of Minneapolis sending a representative. I've watched this presentation come through in many different places that I represent, so it's interesting seeing it here. TAB's the only place that's televised in this way. I think this is deserving of conversation, and I really want to talk about just the impacts and how this applies to our policy. But most importantly, like I said before, I want to make this clear that these really do have real impacts on people living in these areas. And I was really hoping, I was sort of darkly joking before this meeting. I looked through my phone for everything that happened after these resurfacing improvements, which are significant. I don't want to deny that they were significant. They're really significant to take away one of the 3 vehicle lanes going through here in both directions. That calms traffic. It absolutely does. But I was really hoping I could look through my phone and not see a picture of a flipped car on this intersection, and yet I did. And that's not me monitoring this going out every day, it's just when I hear a crash. So dangerous intersections need attention. I want to figure out how TAB can do better with that. And this is just one example where our scope policy change, federal requirements, all these things are coming together to create a difficult situation. But I just want to reiterate, I definitely support the scope change. I want to make that very clear.
All right, good. Thanks for those thoughts. Maybe it would be helpful to have the city person here, the city of Minneapolis. Sure. Representative, to talk a little bit about, I'm sure you looked at accident data at the 2 intersections you wanted to eliminate from the scope for the present time. Maybe also speak to, I think, what Member Johnson's concerns are, and many on the TAB exec committee as well, was that it's kind of redoing those 2 intersections kind of beyond the capital improvement plan forecasted for now, at least. But maybe you have some different thoughts on that, but we sure want you to share those with the TAB.
Sure. Chair Hovland, members of the committee, my name is Katie White. I'm a senior transportation planner with City of Minneapolis Public Works. I'm not the planner assigned to this project, but I am involved in our capital programming decisions. You're absolutely right. Also, Joe McPherson is correct, and Glenn Johnson is also correct. with all the summary that's been given on this project to date. City of Minneapolis recognizes the safety improvements that are needed at Park and Portland intersections. When the City of Minneapolis applied for this grant at these 4 locations, we did not know that Hennepin County was planning on coming through with their own project. And so as a result, we wanted to be proactive and address these safety concerns. And we're very happy to hear that Hennepin County is interested. They actually, when we applied for the grant, we didn't know that there were going to be a mill and overlay project with interim safety conditions applied with the lane reduction. So we're very supportive of all the work that Hennepin County has done on these streets and does plan to do in the future. Also, from a capital programming perspective, Hennepin County has a 5-year CIP that does not currently include Park and Portland. But in our conversations with Hennepin County, we're very comfortable with what they've said with the work plan, with the idea that Park and Portland is next up, that these are the projects in queue to move into their 5-year CIP. So from a capital programming perspective, the City of Minneapolis is supportive and understanding of where Park and Portland lie for a future project. I'll say that Glenn Johnson was absolutely correct about federal payback rules. Also, if the City of Minneapolis came through to do intersection improvements at these locations now, not only would we have to pay back some of that money, but also the work would just be torn up. Hennepin County is talking about future street reconstruction, which involves regrading the subsurface, and maybe, whatever we built on those dark blue dots would have to be completely torn out in order to match the grades of the new street that's about to be built. And so it's just financially inefficient, unsupportable. It's really kind of wasteful to build something with concrete elements that are incredibly expensive, time-consuming, take a lot of coordination to build, only to have them torn up in a few years after that. I'd say that is the bigger priority, not just our payback responsibilities, but just from an efficiency standpoint and being a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And so we recognize that there are safety needs on Park and Portland. We have a lot of very productive conversations about the safety needs across the city, across Hennepin County, with the county. We're comfortable with the decision that the county has made, and we're also comfortable with option 2 as recommended by the TAC.
Okay. That's where I was going to ask you that, and if you didn't address it, so thanks for doing that. Anybody members have questions for Ms. White? Okay, Commissioner.
And I don't know, lack of a Hennepin County person to put you on the spot, but I'm just kind of gobsmacked that there wouldn't have been some coordination. In other words, I don't know how far out your mill and overlays are and stuff, but I mean, in Dakota County, we have stuff programmed years out.
Yeah, we do too.
So why in 2022, you didn't know about a project in
No, it's scheduled out. We share with.
24? I'm not, and then it begs the question, in future applications, if they involved an intersection of a city and county road, should we see a joint application or a letter of support from the non-applying entity that they're all in on the coordination of this actually happening?
Sure. Chair Hovland, members of the committee, I do believe we have letter of support from Hennepin County in our application for this project as it's currently scoped. We do a lot of capital programming coordination with Hennepin County. Yeah, I think I wasn't part of those conversations in 2022 as we led up to those applications. I would say from my current experience, some things change, some things move around, and the decisions that made sense, 4 years ago, sometimes, we are always getting new information, and it's important to update our plans.
I mean, it's definitely a miss, but,
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna set a precedent here today, right? I mean, whether this is approved or not, and, I mean, the 2 intersections aren't even on the same road, we're gonna set a precedent, and I think people need to recognize that. Just whatever we do here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Member Marino.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying on the fact that, I would want to see more coordination on the sense of, maybe not even just like a letter of support, but just saying, hey, you know, that since Hennepin County has some autonomy on this road, we are not planning on ripping this up within 10 years. And so that this doesn't have to become a conversation, because I'm sure there's been engagement and stuff that's been part of this process. And, you know, some of that can go forward in 8 years, but some of that will probably need new conversations on, you know, what are the things that's changed on the ground. Maybe that there's different design standards that they want to bring forward in that time, and that's extra work for staff. And so, yeah, if there's that situation, I would really like to see that, you know, there is a little bit more conversation for that in the future. Maybe that can be baked into some of our process in the application, maybe. I'm not sure how that would work, though.
All right, thanks, Member Marino. Elaine?
Yeah, I can actually respond to that. We do ask that the applicants contact other entities with their, if someone else owns the property and providing a letter of support. So if Hennepin County did that, then something was missed then of reviewing that project versus their own project. I know with the MnDOT, we do require, we specifically require if it's on a MnDOT roadway, the MnDOT provides a letter, but we do ask that others are contacted. But if there was a letter, then that would have shown that they did. So must have been some miscommunication. But maybe that going forward, it's going further. We're doing this project. Do you also have a subsequent project? Might be a way for them to ask.
In the TAB Exec Committee meeting, Member Coleman, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were the person that raised the issue of, well, what if we did nothing? You know, what if we just said, you got a project approved in 2022, either get that project built in 2027 or, you know, turn the money back. I think that was, you touched on that briefly as one of the options, Chair. And maybe you could discuss that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, that's kind of the hidden option 4. That's not included in here. That would be if the TAB did not approve the scope change request, then what would happen is essentially the project reverts back to what the original scope was in their application. And then the agency would have to decide, are they going to move forward with the originally planned improvements? Or in some cases, do they turn the federal funds back or come back with a revised scope change? So it would change the course of the project.
Yeah. And they have not requested a extension yet.
Mr. Chair, not at this time.
We usually grant one extension request, but they have not done that.
Correct.
Okay, okay. All right, so this is kind of the framework for this conversation that took place at Exec Committee. And you can see it has some elements to it that are pretty fascinating. Member Martinson.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a helpful question that was just raised about whether, if we were to deny the request, it's going to delay the project. They're going to have to come back because the county has done some of the work on those 2 intersections. And I don't, from what we've seen, I don't think we want to delay. I don't think we want to slow down any of the safety improvements on any 4 of those intersections. And so I was one of the people that raised the question about whether we could deny the request altogether at Exec. And at this point, I think that would not be a good, that would not be, I would not support that move. Let me put it that way.
So would you mind telling us what you would be supportive of?
I'm supportive of option, I could be persuaded to go with option 1, quite honestly. But I'm supportive of option 2, and it sounds like that's where there's been consensus on F&P and at TAC. And we've also heard that the city is accepting of that option as well. It feels to me like that's reasonable because we're not adding elements, right? We're not allowing them to use federal money to add elements that weren't in the original. The bike lane had nothing to do with the original grant that was made in 2022. There's already separated bike lanes painted on lane. It's a low enough local traffic street. I bike it, and the painted bike lanes are not horrendous. They're not terrible. So I guess mostly I'm supportive of option 2 is what I would say.
All right, thanks for those thoughts. Commissioner Gattel, then Commissioner Jepson.
Well, I was going to move option 2.
Second.
All right, that's good way to foster more discussion. All right, we got a motion and a second with respect to adoption of option 2. Now further discussion. Commissioner Jepson.
Did you have?
Or do you?
Go ahead.
Okay. No, I appreciate the explanation and the understanding as to what you're wanting to do, what the purpose is, and I think anytime a local government agency volunteers to give back dollars says a lot, that it's not needed you don't want to do that project anymore, because I also think it's a waste of taxpayer dollars to do a major project, and then with the possibility of having it ripped up or short time later, that's also not something that we want to do. So I was going to make the motion to approve number 2, but Commissioner Gotell beat me to it, so.
Yeah, all right, well, we got further discussion. Anyone? Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner, go ahead.
just a clarity, what's option 2 again?
You just square up your microphone a little bit, please.
May you just clarify what option 2 is again?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I can run through that again if
Sure,
you'd like.
go ahead.
So option 2 would be the removal of funding that was associated with the dark blue or purple circles that you see on the screen. And then adding a little money back for the additional scope associated with the design measures that have taken place since the time of application at the light blue circles that you see on the screen, but it does not include any of the work associated with the red line, which is that head-to-head bicycle trail, kind of that separated trail system. So it falls in line with the policy we have.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
they would retain $1,247,719 and return $752,281.
Thank you.
Plus do the work that was described by the chair. Okay,
And Mr. Chair,
yes.
just to clarify, because the red line was not in the original application.
Correct.
So it avoids setting the precedent
Right.
of putting in a new one.
That's right.
Correct.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion to adopt option number 2 with respect to 2026-14, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah.
Carried. Well, that was a shorter conversation than I expected.
Good job, Mr. Chair.
All right. So that takes care of the work, the voting portion of the agenda, the non-consent portion of the agenda. We've got a few things to talk about in the informational portion of the agenda, and we'll take on first the TDM matter, and I think Jonathan Ehrlich is going to introduce a topic, and then we've got a guest from the University of Minnesota, I think, with us to talk a little bit about some of their work in this area. Mr. Ehrlich, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. I'm here to talk a little bit about the Applied Research and Transportation Program and to introduce our guest speaker. So the Applied Research and Transportation Program is a pilot program that our partners at the Center for Transportation Studies and MnDOT formed a couple of years ago, initially to focus on sustainability, but then broadened to focus on really any research topic that we need a relatively quick answer to. We joined this last year. We spend $50,000 annually of our annual UPW funding on it, and each year develop internally and collaboratively with CTS staff a small research project that addresses a specific need or process, and that allows us to procure a research project, identify researchers, and get answers and data from the university in a relatively quick manner. And so the project that you're going to see is the first one that we funded last year in 2025. MnDOT has also funded a couple of projects both last year and this year, one on the distribution of e-bike rebate and data collection for analysis of travel behavior impact, another on modeling household vehicle miles traveled using a accessibility model, and there is a project underway that MnDOT's funding on modeling induced demand in rural areas. So there's a wide variety of projects that both MnDOT and the council have the ability to do. The project you're about to see is both something that we generated internally in collaboration with CTS and turned out to opportunistically lead into a much larger consultant study on integration of travel demand management for highway projects that's going to occur in this year. So that's just a brief overview of the process and partnership with CTS that leads to this project. We are looking forward to bringing our partners at CTS to talk more about their wider program and our wider collaboration later this year. But now I want to introduce to you this project on the integration of transportation demand management for highway projects and introduce Caitlin Denton to you. She is a researcher from Humphrey School's Institute of Urban and Regional Infrastructure Finance, whose research focuses on transportation finance and the evaluation of impacts of transportation projects and programs. She earned her Master of Urban and Regional Planning from the Humphrey School at the University of Minnesota, and we'll let her speak about this research.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ehrlich. Ms. Denton, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. So my name is Caitlin Denton. I'm here to talk with you about the TDM study. So this is a study that originally was identified through the Travel Demand Management Study Action Plan in October of 2023. When we talk about travel demand management, we abbreviate it TDM. It's also referred to as transportation demand management, and this is the use of strategies that maximize the efficiency of our transportation system. So these are things like mode shift, transit, and other options. So this study provides a general roadmap for how TDM can be used, specifically in the context of highway projects. And this is supporting the upcoming work that the council is doing. So for this project specifically, we focused on a nationwide scan of projects from 2000 to October of 2025. This was limited to projects in the United States, and we looked at both academic literature and other roadway projects that included some component of TDM. And then the second part of this is a best practices portion, which really summarized those practices that we found across multiple projects in the scan. So for our findings from the national scan, we focused on 4 different buckets. So we looked at policies for the incorporation of TDM strategies in roadway projects. We looked at the incorporation of TDM during the planning or construction phase of projects. We looked at transportation projects that enhance mode choice in some way and incorporate TDM. And then we also looked at the incorporation of TDM plans to manage travel demand in highway corridors. So when we looked at policies for the incorporation of TDM strategies in roadway projects, we found a number of states that included or required the incorporation of some level of TDM strategies into their roadway projects at a statewide policy level. So this looks like Colorado's Policy Directive 1601 and the Minnesota Greenhouse Gas Emissions Impact Assessment. We also found that some require the incorporation of TDM strategies into traffic management plans, or TMPs. So this example was California's Deputy Directive 60-R2 and New Jersey's traffic mitigation guidelines. So when we looked at the incorporation of TDM during the planning or construction phase, we primarily found that these TDM strategies are incorporated as part of either the National Environmental Policy Act process or the NEPA process during the planning phase of the project, or as a traffic mitigation strategy during the construction of the project. So one example of that NEPA process is the I-405 corridor program in Washington, where they used TDM as a major element of proposed alternatives in the EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement. And in traffic mitigation, the reconstruction of Highway 101 in Central California, the city developed TDM strategies to enhance mobility during and after the reconstruction period. And TDM is currently being incorporated into the construction phase of the I-494 project, which is underway, and that information from that effort will be available to study the lessons learned from that. We also looked at these transportation projects that enhance mode choice and incorporate TDM. So this looks like roadway projects who construct elements that enhance modal choice and therefore support demand management. This is seen with a number of multimodal enhancements built in addition to that roadway project. So the Transportation Expansion, or T-REX project in Denver, Colorado, built 17 miles of light rail transit alongside their highway reconstruction project. And the Transform 66 Outside the Beltway project in Virginia and Maryland included managed lanes similar to Easy Pass lanes that offer free access for transit and high occupancy vehicles that include 3 or more individuals. We also found the incorporation of TDM plans to manage this travel demand. So some partners have adopted plans to manage travel demand in certain corridors. Examples of this are the North Coast TDM plan in California, where they capture current and future TDM needs to then inform those future roadway projects that they're planning. And the I-70 East Corridor Multimodal TDM plan, where they considered corridor-wide TDM strategy implementations in response to the policy directive that I identified earlier, Policy Directive 1601. So there are a number of common factors that we identified in this incorporation of TDM strategies and roadway projects. First and foremost, a number of these projects had identified and knew their community to understand their travel patterns, because it's important to know who you are designing for and what different strategies may be most helpful for that community before you can then decide what needs to be done. They also had a high level of coordination between these involved transit agencies, so DOTs, counties, city, transportation management organizations. And they had a high level of involvement in those transportation management organizations or transportation management associations in this implementation of TDM strategies. They offered different strategies for different types of travelers. They established a definition of success regarding TDM approaches, so they knew what success would look like in order to measure it. And then they identified those TDM target measures to actually see what that success would look like, entail, and how they get there and measure it. So out of this were a number of best practices. First and foremost, again, is knowing your community and their travel patterns, as this helps inform those TDM strategies. Also incorporating TDM into policies and practices of highway project development ahead of time instead of trying to do it retroactively. A number of these set SMART goals, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound for TDM strategies. And then they selected these strategies that work hand in hand with each other. We also found that they established flexible strategies from planning to post-construction, as the beginning of a construction project may have different needs to move folks through the corridor than towards the end of the project. They ensured that there's a number of sufficient and sustaining funding sources for these TDM strategies. And then they monitored and documented progress. So in conclusion, TDM integration in highway projects should generally increase as states respond to sustainability goals, increasingly expensive highway expansion projects, and unreliable travel through the corridor. These effective TDM implementations could even reduce the need or delay those costly infrastructure projects. And the foundation of this work is feeding into future work that the council is doing to integrate TDM into highway expansions. And with that, I can stand for
Ms.
questions.
Denton, thank you. Questions for Ms. Denton? Yeah, Member Coleman.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation. Do you mind going back 2 slides? I'm curious about the second bullet point here and how you assessed or quantified the coordination between the involved transportation agencies. Yeah, I'd love to know more about that.
Mr. Chair, committee members, we generally looked at how they were joining efforts per se. So a lot of this looked at how they were communicating and using very specific skill sets and resources that they had available. So for instance, a DOT may have more overarching statewide resources, whereas a TMO really knows the area that they're serving very specifically. So being able to do like business engagement and very specific engagement for employees that go through this corridor but don't go through it all the time or have the flexibility to move is really how we looked at that. Thank you.
Would you advance one slide, please? I wanted to ask you, and maybe Jonathan Early can help on this too, is there these best practices that you found relative to TDM as you looked around the country, did you compare them to what we're doing here with respect to TDM to see if we were capturing all of these best practices that you found were important to be thinking about?
Chair and members, my name is Bethany Brandt, and I am the current project manager of the upcoming Integrating TDM study. Part of this best practices work that they identified, we're going to continue building on, as well as that TDM action plan from 2023. And we're going to be working with our MnDOT partners and a lot of county partners and city agencies to help us identify those and then make recommendations for tools and practices and guidance specific to the region. So we're really looking to bring those best practices to our work. And there are a lot of agencies doing this, but we're looking to pull it all together in a regional approach.
This may have been a Minnesota bias or a TAP bias, but I always thought we were the standard for best practices, but we can always get better at what we do, I guess is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes, and we can be more coordinated and maybe more consistent in our approaches.
Okay. That prompt other questions? Yes, member.
We are, I think we are an example of best practices. Some of those we've done for, like going back, like a managed lane one. We started that in 2005. We went to Europe, learned from the Europeans how you take excess capacity like a shoulder during the day. When there's no traffic, it's a safety shoulder, a safety feature. When the road, when the congestion starts, you open that up to relieve traffic, and some places it's free, sometimes it's tolled. And when we brought it, maybe Ms. Venowitz remembers, we talked about that, and we did several of those actually. And I'm a big advocate of that, where instead of adding and expanding the freeway, using that capacity and optimizing our system and adding capacity with what we have, because we cannot build ourselves out of congestion. That's a given. And so anyway, I just wanted to say, yeah, I think some of those things, some maybe we haven't, but some we for sure have done for 20 plus years, or at least thought about it back then.
Thank you. Commissioner Ulrich.
Well, maybe this is a comment on best practices. The Colorado T-Rex light rail finished 22 months early under budget. How's that compare with us?
All right, thanks for that sobering moment. Anybody else? All right, Ms.
Mr.
Dent, thanks for being, oh yeah, Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you. When you're doing the travel demand strategies and looking at this, have you also considered land use too, how it intersects with that?
Mr. Chair, committee members, we did not specifically look at land use for this. We were more looking just overall nationally, generally what's being done. So we did not get specifically into land uses.
Okay. And then my next question is, where you think, or for future work, where it's also kind of suggesting that the TDM strategies will help to reduce capital highway expansion needs. Have you seen some of those examples in other places, or where that's being done, where they are actually saving from capital projects?
Ms. Briggs.
Thank you, Chair and members. I'm not aware of any that have explicitly avoided in the long term but they've been used to mitigate or manage congestion as they are pursuing the funding. But obviously, we know that traffic patterns change, and as projects get longer to implement, you might see that those TDM strategies are effective.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Ms. Dent, for being here. Thanks for the work. I'm sure we'll see you again on some other projects that you're working on, transportation related. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
We've got Kyle Burrows with us today too to talk about some of the arterial BRT planning that's going on and talking about next steps, I think, for this ABRT system that is now through A through E.
That's correct. Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Kyle O'Donnell Burrows. I'm the planning manager for arterial BRT here at Metro Transit, and I am here to share as an information item the recommendations that Metro Transit is bringing forward to the Metropolitan Council for the outcomes of the arterial BRT plan update, where we've identified a J line and a K line for consideration. So we've been to TAB a couple of times before throughout major milestones over the course of the year, but what I'll do today is recap a little bit of the process we've been taking to get to this point, as well as then sharing our recommendations following the fourth step of our process, which we recently completed, the prioritization step, where we were sort of building from the evaluation results and ultimately selecting the next lines for recommendation from that. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about our next steps over the course of this year and specific to our plan update. First, we've seen this slide before, but just grounding us a little bit on the purpose and sort of role of arterial BRT within Metro Transit's overall bus network. So as folks know, Metro Transit has a variety of tools available to us sort of that we apply corresponding to the specific transit and transportation need that we are trying to meet. Those tools really sort of align on a sort of coverage to ridership spectrum, where tools on the coverage side of things are really about trying to make sure that there is a basic level of transit and transportation access for a particular geographic area. So a core example of that is our demand responsive style services, Metro Micro. Other providers do something similar as well, where there is a sort of a geographic service area, and we're trying to provide a basic level of service sort of in that area. On the farther end of that spectrum, the ridership-oriented side of the spectrum is arterial BRT, where the goal here is to provide as many rides on transit as possible. And so we typically do that in sort of denser, walkable, higher population, higher job areas, and try to do that with high frequency, high ridership services that kind of support transit being as convenient as possible and generating as much ridership as possible. Our regional guidance sort of aligns with those different purposes with respect to each of these different tools, where arterial BRT is expected to provide 25 passengers or more per in-service hour. This is the highest productivity guideline of any bus-style transit service that we offer in our region. So it's really geared towards trying to get as many people on and off the bus as possible. And consequently, we're directed to kind of focus this style of investment in market areas 1 and 2, where we expect the sort of highest transit demand potential in our region based on land use characteristics, population, demographics, these types of things. So the core question faced before us with the arterial BRT plan update is really, where should the next lines go? So we've identified, we are operating A through E as the chair identified. We have identified 3 lines beyond that, the F, G, and H lines, to be opened by 2030. And our core question here was, what about the next set between 2030 and 2035? So we took a 4-step process to get to this point, where we really started at the beginning of this year with a wide set of candidate corridors. So we identified 17 candidate corridors to begin with, and sort of worked our way through this process, narrowing down up until we got to this point where we have today have identified the next recommended lines. So through that process, we took a screening step where we narrowed down to the most promising corridors. Those most promising corridors were evaluated against a set of detailed technical evaluation criteria and ranked on that score. And then from that, we've sort of taken that score as the basis of sort of how well are each of those corridors meeting arterial BRT and overall regional goals, and selected those based on readiness criteria and sort of other considerations. So casting us back to the spring, our first step really was to identify those candidate corridors. These are really drawn from a wide pool of different route types and route purposes within our region, high frequency, existing and planned services, partner priorities, corridors identified in the transportation policy, in the 2040 transportation policy plan already. We narrowed down to these 11 candidate corridors over this summer. And you can see those corridors overlaid with the transit market areas. And so you can see how they relate to transit market areas 1, 2, and 3, and sort of those areas of expected high transit demand. Finally, this fall, we completed that technical evaluation of each of these corridors, sort of in-depth technical evaluation. Those evaluation criteria were really centered around 4 goals that we have for this program and sort of tie back to the transportation policy plan, really around ridership, equity, cost and sustainable growth, and then connecting supportive land uses. Each of those goals could score up to 25 points per corridor for 100 total points possible for each corridor. And you can see those those results shown here. And again, we've seen this before, but really top 3 corridors emerging from that process were the Nicollet Corridor, Franklin Grand 3rd Street Corridor, and the West 7th Street Corridor. And then following down from there in sort of approximately equal point distributions sort of down the line from there. So we started then that prioritization step, which is that 4th step, where we're really sort of reviewing each of these corridors, starting from that technical evaluation results and sort of working our way down from highest to lowest and saying, is this corridor ready to go? Or is there maybe some reason that we need to, pause, let some things develop, kind of assess the situation before committing to arterial BRT in this corridor? And so we really used the rider and community feedback we received throughout the process that we undertook this past year, as well as kind of thinking about readiness with our and kind of partner coordination to sort of help us assess and identify what those potential questions might be, and then kind of reviewed each of those corridors based on those, and then ultimately prepared our recommendations following that. So those readiness questions, really thinking about 3 questions we have here. First is, how compatible is the current and future roadway conditions with arterial BRT infrastructure and service? So we have a certain footprint that arterial BRT stations kind of need to fit within the right-of-way. Some roadways work better than others in those contexts. We want to make sure before we're committing to anything that the arterial BRT platform and station design actually fits within that roadway. How well does each corridor sort of fit within the existing and planned transit network? So here we're really thinking about, yes, individual corridors score particularly well, but how well does it fit within the overall planned metro network? And finally, are there other major unanswered questions about the corridor alignment or potential termini? Is the line on the map effectively the line that we ultimately would want to be implementing, or are there some questions that we still need to answer about those? The other element of this consideration is really timing. And so thinking about those technical evaluation criteria, how well does each corridor advance our goals, pairing those with readiness, thinking about, okay, is there a reason to kind of hold on this corridor, then bringing into timing. So making sure that we're able to align with planned or programmed roadway projects in a corridor that's identified as a good candidate for arterial BRT. So that helps us kind of identify, when should each corridor be implemented? Should it be the J line? Should it be the K line? That type of thing. We want to avoid kind of doing, multiple construction projects in a single corridor, separated only by a few years, and really try to efficiently deliver both roadway improvements and transit improvements sort of in a single cohesive experience for our communities. So taking a look at these recommendations at a glance, there's a lot to look at here. I'm going to focus today on the recommendations for the J line and the K line. We also have some dispensations for the rest of these corridors and additional work to do on these other corridors. But the recommendation we shared to the Met Council and Committee of the Whole in January, and then we'll be bringing forward to Council later this month and in March, is to identify the West 7th Street corridor as the J line and the Nicollet corridor as the K line. And at this point, we are holding off on, right now, identifying an L line while we do some additional study on that Franklin Grand 3rd Street corridor, which is the other sort of top 3 scoring corridor that is a good candidate for arterial BRT. But there are some pretty significant questions that we want to make sure that we're turning over and answering before committing to that corridor or one of the other L-line corridors. So that's those recommendations here on the map. So you can see the J line as West 7th Street, K line as Nicollet. Additional work we want to be doing, so that corridor study I mentioned of the Franklin Grand 3rd Street corridor. Then following that corridor study, we'll be coming back to recommend an L line from one of those 3 candidate corridors. Finally, and on a separate path, we're also going to be completing a feasibility study of the C line, looking at both north and south ends of the C line. That'll capture some of the corridors or parts of corridors that we had already considered. So the 63rd and Zane corridor in Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, and then the Bloomington portion of the Bloomington-Lindale corridor. And this slide just kind of shows our current local ridership by corridor paired with kind of that recommendation for what that corridor looks like. So this is looking at 2024 average daily ridership on the local routes within this corridor. And you can kind of see the corridors that are either recommended for advancement as the J line or the K line, or some additional study and future consideration, are the corridors that tend to be higher ridership existing corridors. And then looking towards the future here as well, looking at kind of our future productivity. So remember that the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan guides arterial BRT to achieve 25 passengers per in-service hour or more. And you can kind of see this graph showing where each of those corridors land with respect to that guideline. So we have a number of corridors that are expected to sort of generate more passengers per in-service hour than that guideline, several that are sort of right at that margin, and then a few that we looked at that are not at this point expected to achieve that at this point, pending future development in these corridors. So our timeline for next steps, our next step here will be to we'll be at the Council Transportation Committee next week, and then the full council the second week of March, with the business item recommending the J and K line for council adoption. Later this spring, we'll be, pending council action, we'll be submitting the J line for consideration for the 2026 regional solicitation process, and then working with our MTS and council partners to begin the Transportation Policy Plan amendment process to include the J line and the K line. We'll also be initiating that Franklin Grand 3rd Street corridor study, and then later in 2026, following the completion of that work, recommending an L line corridor. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand for questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think there will be some questions for Mr. Burrows, comments? Yeah, Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the update. The J line, I believe, as that goes into downtown St. Paul, it uses the same stations as the GO line. I don't know if it's all of them or if there's a couple that are unique to the J line or.
Mr. Chair, committee members, yeah, through the portion of the alignment where they are shared in downtown St. Paul, they would use the same station.
Yeah. What I've noticed and what I like is there's enough arterial bus rapid or in future BRTs that you're starting to use the same stations. So there's a significant savings when you're not rebuilding stations and duplicating the use of them, or even, actually, there's many more lines at a station than just two usually. It's nice to see that happening. Also, I think in the case of the gold line being just really a year old, not even quite a year old, 11 months, this will be a great way to get out West 7th Street. I'm a St. Paulite at heart, so I ventured to both Hennepin and Ramsey counties, and this gets people around much better. So I really like the connection we're starting to make with some of these bus lines. I think it's going to make hopefully it'll make a difference in ridership.
Thank you, Commissioner. Member
Thank you.
Coleman.
Thanks so much for this presentation. My question is about the Franklin Grand Third Corridor study. It seems like numerically everything that was quantified, it looks like a great option. I know there are lots of folks who are very, very, very excited about that possibility. Could you share a little bit more about what you'll be looking at in the study and what the current concerns are?
Mr. Chair, members, yeah, it's a great question. Really, it boils down to a couple of things. So Franklin Avenue in Hennepin County in Minneapolis, both as segments of it that exist today, as well as kind of future planned segments, actually to be under construction this year, are a little bit tight. So the right-of-way there's a lot trying to happen on Franklin Avenue, and we just need to be really, really thoughtful about how and whether stations can fit on Franklin Avenue on arterial BRT. And then there's kind of two other elements to that, sort of having to do with the alignment itself. One is really how does that corridor get across the Mississippi River? Does it, as it's currently defined, kind of go up through the University of Minnesota, or does it continue across, excuse me, the Franklin Avenue Bridge? This is kind of a combination of two existing local routes, the Route 63 in St. Paul, and then the Route 2 in Minneapolis, and kind of serving the University of Minnesota area. And so the best way to kind of do that is still something that we really want to be thoughtful about before committing to arterial BRT on this corridor. On the eastern portion of this corridor, the Franklin Grand 3rd Street corridor is obviously operating on 3rd Street, which is pretty close to the Gold Line. There's some opportunity for obviously complementary services in corridors that are close together, but we want to really make sure that we're sharpening our pencils and kind of taking a look and making sure, is that segment the right spot for arterial BRT, or the other kind of primary consideration is 7th Street in that area. Is that a better balance between the upcoming Bronze Line and the existing Metro Gold Line to serve transit demand in that area?
Thanks.
Very good. Member Lindeke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was the same as Councilmember Coleman's, but I'll just follow up with, I was curious about how Selby Avenue on the B line is affecting service for the ABRT that's running there. It seems a similar width as to Franklin. Is that right?
Mr. Chair, committee members, the trouble with Franklin is how it works with the bikeway and the right of way behind the sidewalk, not between the roadways. Can we actually fit the station infrastructure back behind the curb? It's a lot narrower there on that part than it is on Selby Avenue.
Sure. I was impressed with the E-line stations in the university area that have managed that bicycle pedestrian interaction pretty well, although it's still winter, and so you're not seeing the kind of traffic that you're going to see in about a month over there. So thanks for the comprehensive answer.
Yeah, thanks for that. Member Marino.
Yeah, I would just say I appreciate that the East 7th corridor is being considered, just from the fact that it is also known as the intertribal cultural corridor on the east side. It has better route spacing from the H line and the Gold Line and the Bronze Line. And also, especially in the eastern portion, there's a lot of ample opportunity for much needed transit-oriented development over there, especially in housing. There's vacant lots and abandoned buildings in areas that need a little TLC. And I really want to see that be considered, and I would love to be a part in helping to facilitate some conversations on the east side. Also, the other question I would have is, I understand that the most of these arterial bus rapid transit corridors are trying to stay within Transit Market 2 or 1, like you said. The one thing that I noticed, though, is Nicollet Avenue, south of that into Bloomington, the majority of that would be in Transit Market 2, could potentially connect with the 98th Street Orange Line station. And as I know a few people who lived in Bloomington and rely on transit in that area and, you know, are quite frustrated and wanted me to kind of bring that up into here is why that, you know, if maybe except for a few blocks that are outside of the Transit Market 2, why are we not looking at expanding that into connection with an existing metro line?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, it's a great question. So the scope of this study that we were doing here, the arterial BRT plan update, really stayed within the corridors kind of as they had been defined initially. Nothing that we're doing right now would like preclude a potential consideration of an extension of that. So, you know, that's not to say that that's something that wouldn't happen in the future. We do look for sort of logical termini and sort of major, you know, kind of either terminal points, spaces that have, you know, good layover location. That's partially why the American Boulevard terminal was identified in addition to kind of sort of step downs from kind of transit demand and ridership there. But you are correct to identify that, you know, throughout our engagement process, some questions certainly have been raised about both the terminal of the Nicollet Avenue corridor as well as some of the other corridors. And we're definitely carrying that feedback forward through into the corridor planning, the specific corridor planning processes that we'll be doing, having now recommended these corridors as the specific lettered lines.
Thank you.
Any further, Member Moreno? Okay. Member Gustafson.
Yeah, so one of the questions, as I was looking at this map and reflecting on my own experience living on the 54, is it desirable that all of these routes essentially start and stop in downtown as opposed to running through downtown and connecting them up? When I look at transit maps in other cities, this is a very common thing that I see, that they don't necessarily start and stop at the central location. They kind of go through that central location, even connect many important stations up along that central location. And so when I think of my own use of, say, the 54, I use it for many different reasons. Going to the airport on business trips as one example versus going to the barber shop on West 7th versus coming here. All have different purposes, but to have to change seats seems like it may be a big barrier for a lot of people. And I already know that if I had to change seats for a business trip, when it's just easier for me to carry my roll-on onto the bus and then carry the roll-on into the airport, I would take an Uber. I don't want to do that, but that just straight up would be the most practical for me. So have we thought a little bit more about kind of continuing these lines through instead of just that downtown point?
Mr. Chair, committee members, yeah, that's definitely something that is balanced on sort of a corridor by corridor, but also sort of a network basis, right? So one of the advantages of what, let me take it, there's unfortunately, no single line that can connect every single destination, right? So we do have to kind of rely on a transit network to meet the trip purposes of our broader community. And so there is sort of that balance between, you know, running like a through line or extending the line even farther versus ending it at a terminal location like specific to West 7th Street, like Union Depot, where we have a lot of that infrastructure that exists already and can kind of support a terminal. One of the advantages about the level of frequency that we provide and the infrastructure that we provide on these style of services is we try to, though we do have to rely on transfers and connections, minimize the impact of that. So if you're going from one high-frequency style service to another high-frequency style service at a shelter with light and heat and real-time arrival time information, our goal is to try to, though we do have to occasionally rely on transfers to complete all those connections, make those as painless and seamless as possible.
Yeah, I understand that. I think of my own use and needing to travel across various parts of the city, and downtown isn't necessarily the only stop.
Sure.
Member Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate it. Just want to, thank definitely Kyle and team and all of them for all this hard work. I also want to thank the legislature because of some of the sales tax money, we can do this good planning. This planning is the building of the things is very, very important. The planning of them really frees us up to really be sort of the state-of-the-art ABRT system in the country, and this is just another step in that direction. I definitely want to thank TAB for their commitment to helping fund these lines going forward. It is a huge asset, not only to be able to say we believe in this type of thing, but then even when we go to the legislature, it's like to say, look, we're doing something here and we, need some help. And it really makes a big difference in those conversations. Also want to thank the team for swiftly building in West 7th. So West 7th it was Riverview Corridor, then it was going to be its own standalone project, and then there were a bunch of things happened, and then that all sort of fell apart. We all knew West 7th and needed some attention, and because of their very, very quick action, we were able to move that into this project and to make it what will be the J line. I think that is such a huge, important line for our region and have fought that for a very long time. So I'm just really appreciative of all the work and also taking the time to do the initial analysis on the L line. In spending regional dollars and things like that, we want to make sure we're making the right investments, and I would rather study it and make sure we're doing the right thing and then come back to it later. So just thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Member Barber. Yeah, any other one? Oh, yeah, Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Member Barber. I want to echo those same comments too about staff being able to pivot and work on this together, especially when, as a county, for Ramsey County, we had been trying to advance BRT projects. And unfortunately, we weren't just able to get the municipal consent and support of all of those who were impacted. And so that's why we had to pivot, but then have always been at the table to discuss this. So I'm very pleased that we have all the partners coming together to work on this and move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Member Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Hovland. I remember, I believe it was the first info item about the JKL selection. There was that little bit on there about potential extensions, and then that kind of disappeared, and now it's back, and it's about the C line. Clearly the one that makes the most sense. I think building on Member Gustafson's comments, the C line goes to downtown, but not through downtown. So it'd be really nice if it extended further. So I just had some questions about, they're not on the timeline here, but, again, we sort of know the regional solicitation is where we go for the JKL. We have the years kind of set up now. Was it really for timeline, for the logistics, for the financing, just about that C line extension specifically, like what's going on there?
Mr. Chair, committee members, part of the feasibility study that we want to be completing this year is to help us answer those questions. Yeah.
Okay. That's a short answer. I will wait for more on that. I think, again, that was something that it was such an opportunity. It was, again, I'm glad it came back on the radar, and now we're looking at it. So I'll look for that report when it comes out. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Mr. Burrows, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate those updates and the analysis that goes into expanding the system that we found that works very well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple other quick things to cover here. I want you to be thinking about this. We've had some conversation about it together as a group, and we talked about it at the exec committee today, is the acknowledgement that we have on the front of our document, acknowledging where we are and who was here first and whose land this originally was, and thinking about that acknowledgement, wanting it to be something more than just something that we routinely read that loses its meaning over time. So we should be thinking about, other than having it on the agenda for every meeting, are there times of the year that we should be thinking about reading this acknowledgement? Are there special occasions or special meetings that we're having that have more significance than others, where we should be thinking about recognizing the people that were here first and the land that we tread on here, that we travel on. And then also, if you look at the, in conjunction with the acknowledgement, we had the conversation with this at the TAB exec committee meeting as well. If you look at the informational item covering this topic, that was the last one in your packet, on page 4, you'll see something that says transportation policy, and there's 5 elements there. And Member Barber tells us that these commitments are being built into everything that the Met Council is doing. And so it caused us to think as a group about how should the TAB be a good partner on that and be thinking about these elements of transportation policy that we should have in front of us on a regular basis. How do we do that? You know, and so it's not a day where we have to make a decision. We can't make a decision today. It's not on the agenda as an action item. But I just want you to start thinking about how we sort of recognize through the acknowledgement and through these commitments that are reflected in the transportation policy on page 4, the things that we need to be mindful of as we're doing our work. I don't know, Chair Barber, if you have any other thoughts you want to add quickly before we move on to one other topic.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a ton, but I think it is important to look at this and make a decision of how we as a body do want to put this information out and how we want to recognize our commitments, our land, water, and people commitments that we are made to the region. And we did this in a combined effort with a group that we kind of assembled. That's one of the things we do is, get people in a room together, which was the American Indian Advisory Committee. The commitments are what they came up with, and then we are linking them to the Imagine 2050 plan. So it's really, what are we going to do? There are a lot of places that have acknowledgement statements that just get read at every meeting, and then it becomes just words. And rather than be just words, we were looking more towards the commitments, so it would be actions. And that is kind of the direction we're trying to take. We say it at every council meeting, but each committee has been taking a different approach to it. At transportation, we move locations throughout the year. So when we move a location, we say the full statement, but every meeting we say, as we introduce the meeting, we acknowledge that, on the top of the agenda is the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. So it's a hybrid. I think the group can decide what you're comfortable with, what makes the most sense. I think it's really important to really tie it to more of the actions than just always reading the statement.
Yeah, good, thank you, Chair Barber. All right, so give that some thought, Elaine.
Well, if we could have some discussion, when we were preparing this for an action item, because that's what TAB Executive had recommended last October, and then Jim and I met last week to go through the action item, and then we didn't know what to put down for a motion. So we changed it into an information item. So it would be nice if there was some discussion, what you would like us, I could bring back next month an action, but having an idea of what you would like to put as the motion. It could be further discussed if there was changes, but just giving us some feedback on that.
Member Bradley.
Mr. Chair, I was just thinking about this too, because we had some time to think about it when we saw it in the executive office, and I just think, in the beginning of the year, we changed some board seats and everything here and everything like this. It might be really good, because we would introduce it then to some of our other board members who might be new, and then remind ourselves. So for sure, I would think we'd want to do it maybe at one of the first meetings of the year. So I'm sure there might be other thoughts.
Member Bradley.
Yes, and that's kind of like what I was going to state or echo, at least doing, like if you're not going to read it at every meeting, then at least doing it at the first meeting of the year and maybe the last meeting of the year. And then maybe in between that time, just mentioning, when you're starting the agenda, there's a Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement, please look, read it over at your leisure or something like that.
Member Coleman, then I'm going to pose a question.
I've been thinking about Member Barber's comments since Executive Committee earlier today, and I really think, I so strongly agree that the acknowledgement is important, but what's really important is the commitments. And I almost wonder if even by having it labeled on here as an acknowledgement, it causes people to say, oh, well, I've heard a land acknowledgement, I know where we sit, I know whose land we sit on, and maybe even like skimming over it. And from something as small as changing it to like land acknowledgement and commitments, but also really emphasizing the commitments and the executive committee today, reading through those and having that space rather than just reading the paragraph that's written here. I think that is the heart of all of this, and it really is what should be guiding our work. So I don't know how that translates into an action, but I really want to underscore that. I thought it was a really well taken point, and I think thinking about how we're using this in decision-making moments rather than as something that is a ceremonial part of a meeting, that to me is where the value lies.
Okay. Chair Barber, do you have your hand back up again?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Councilmember Member Cohen covered it, but I think we're going to try try putting the commitments on the tab agendas because like this group isn't as connected to all of that, but every month you can see those things and then kind of tie some of our work to seeing those.
Yeah.
The ones
Commissioner.
that are transportation
Yeah.
related.
Thank you for that, Member Barber.
Yeah, thank you,
Commissioner, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. Yeah, I also wanted to say that those are definitely sentiments I agree with about making sure that it's meaningful and also grounding us. In addition to those points and times for decisions, I also think equally important is the planning process of creating or even creating rules or programs or policies. And usually that may happen in subcommittees or whatnot, such as, for example, our active transportation work group, that I suggest that, even just having that as a start of the meeting would be very grounding.
Okay, thanks for that thought. Commissioner Jepson, go ahead, then Member Marino.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your comments, Member Barber. I think it's very, having autonomy in making this decision as a collective group, depending upon the voices in the room, greatly appreciate that, and I think that's very important. So I really appreciate hearing that directly from you. I also think, I know it was mentioned in the executive committee, and I apologize, I can't remember who said it, but before we're making a fairly heavy vote on an important subject, again, grounding us in what our decisions are, impact others. And so just being aware of that as well.
Yeah, good thought. That's right. That did come up in the exec committee meeting. So like when we're approving the regional solicitation, Member Marino, and then Member, let's see, we got Brian next.
I would also just say too, using the opportunity to not just acknowledge, but also be able to give power to Indigenous organizations, especially in our community considerations process that we were discussing. And then on top of that, doing more proactive outreach to Indigenous land rights groups to let them know that we exist as a board and TAB, what we do, and to see if any of those people would want to apply or potentially create an opening on our board for somebody from that community to be able to represent those interests.
Right, that's a good thought too. Member Martinson.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, is the most concrete way that we have to implement this is through the community considerations process that's been built very thoughtfully over the last couple of years, because it provides a direct mechanism that can be used for exactly the purposes of addressing the commitments. So,
good, thank you. Member Barber.
Very quickly, Mr. Chair, as Commissioner Jepson was talking, I think we did talk about when there's going to be a big vote, but it's hard to know what that thing is at different points. And perhaps the motion involves something at the direction or at the discretion of the executive committee or discretion of the chair for determining when those things are. Define, like, we'll do January, then there are, because those things happen at different points. And I think I don't know, we're not going to know until we're kind of going through it.
Mm-hmm. I think there's some predictability on some of the things, and the staff can help us on some of that, but nonetheless, point well taken. Commissioner.
Good conversation. There was a woman that presented, I thought she was a Native American.
Yeah, Allison.
But if we could rely on whether we take a meeting or two to decide, I like the beginning of the year ideal. Quarterly, and then maybe there's some unique meeting along the way, seems appropriate. But I thought a Native American woman came here 3 months ago, and if we could consult with her recommendation or the leadership in the Native American community to give us some guidance on what they think would be appropriate.
She couldn't be here with us today because of some surgery her mother was having, I think, but Member Barber.
That is our Metropolitan Council Tribal Liaison, and she's going to tell you to kind of what I had said by and large, that commitments are the most important thing, and that how and where we use the full land acknowledgement statement is really up to us. I spoke with her, so that's
Okay.
kind of the message.
Elaine.
Yeah, I met with Allison last week too, and she wasn't able to make it, but she will be here in March. So before then, if there's any questions or more information you would like before the March time frame, I will be meeting with her again, so if you have any questions that you have right now that I could pass on, there is a staff person, Jillian, here too, that if there is any questions that anyone has that she could respond to.
You know, I was thinking about Commissioner Karwoski's comment. It could be that, do you think staff could get something worked up from a rough draft standpoint for a motion, Elaine, within
Yeah,
a
that's
couple of
what I
weeks?
was-
Within a couple of weeks, so that people have a couple of weeks to think about it and maybe make any suggested edits. Send them back into Elaine,
Okay.
and then maybe we'll be able to do something at the March meeting. So.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
if I could.
Commissioner, go ahead.
Well, I know March is going to be a unique month for
Yeah,
both of us.
maybe we should wait till April.
And I just wanted to comment, Elaine, are you going to send out an email asking for people's attendance ability in March?
I will do that too.
Yeah, wonderful. So I just, depending on that, I don't know if we want to for sure put this on the agenda
I
for
think that's
March
a
and
good thought.
just play it by ear a little bit, maybe.
I think keep it off. Is there people comfortable holding us till April?
Yes.
It's spring break week, and we're, now we're thinking, well, maybe we'll have a quorum issue, and I think
Yeah, ask right now too.
Commissioner Jepson is reminding us that there's not just two people here that maybe are going on spring break somewhere.
Well, there might be a few more, who knows?
Okay, so let's take this up in April, but I think, Elaine, as soon as you're comfortable with staff, get some rough draft out of a potential motion, and we'll start editing it as members and send your comments back into Elaine, and we'll take it up again in March and then deal with it in April. Member Marino.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up that another month has passed where we are underrepresented with transit reps on this board. And, in our meeting on Monday, I asked Charles, Charles mentioned that former TAB members are able to serve in their roles until someone new is appointed. I asked, has there been outreach to those former members? There has not been outreach to those former members.
We're going to talk to Member Vaughn about that, because he's supposed to serve until his replacement comes for that anybody. So we're going to see if he can come back until we find somebody, and they've got a couple of.
Yeah. And I've been in
Yeah, go
contact
ahead.
with him, but he's been asking who his replacement was. He did not reapply because he had some time commitments where he was not able to make the meetings, so that was why he stepped down.
But we'll see if he can step in on an interim basis, to the point you're making.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what is like I haven't seen any outreach from Met Council on this, particularly in the emails on this, and I'm just kind of wondering what outreach has been taken in order to try to find members for the transit representative.
Commissioner, can you hold on for just a second? I want one other topic to cover. Yeah, so we'll finish your thought there. I got it.
Yeah, I just wanted to see, has there been, what outreach has been done by Met Council members on this? And, because it hasn't been in any of the Met Council emails, for example.
Yeah, okay, well, can we deal with that offline? Because we're losing people
Okay.
right and left here, and I got one other topic that's important. So, I think some of you know, not all of you, but because of the economy changing back during COVID, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, NACO, National League of Cities, AMPO, there's 6 local organizations nationwide that have been working on what I'll call localism bills. It's called Back to Basics. We finally got bipartisan support for this bill that would direct money directly to MPOs to use specifically for county units of government and city units of government. So instead of going through the traditional process of having things go to the state DOT, down to the region, and then down eventually to organizations, because of the impact on local roads and transportation infrastructure systems, we're trying to get some money directly to cities and counties. And so it's embodied in HR 7437. So you want to get a hold of Betty and everybody else in the Congress that you know as to support HR 7437, which is the Back to Basics bill. And thanks, Commissioner, for hanging on for a minute.
Okay.
HR 7437. It just got introduced last Monday. And the first go-around will be some of the excess money left over from the Biden administration. And then when the reauthorization comes, we're going to try to get some direct appropriation. But we're making progress because we got bipartisan support now on that idea. This idea is resonating with people. They're seeing it locally. They're seeing their roads all torn up by the big distribution centers and their trucks going out one after another. So, okay, that's all I had. Remember, Marino, if you're gonna have a sidebar over here with staff, they can let you know where they are. And we stand adjourned.
Thanks for
Thank you,
working
thanks for
on that.
sticking around.
Yeah.
All right.